All right, hey everybody, Scott U-Haul here with another virtual coffee chat coming at you. I'd like to say thank you very much for taking a little bit of time today and getting on to our quarter hour of wellness power. So today we're in our sixth series of talking about taking charge of chronic disease using your own personal behavioral health. And I'm excited about today's presentation because we're going to talk about nutritional deficiencies in the typical American diet. Because even though we've got a lot of grocery stores, our diet's really not the best in the world. And so we're going to take a look at that today. So what does the American diet look like? We're going to talk about some nutritional shortcomings related to that diet, some particular vitamins and minerals. And then we're actually going to take a look. I've got some really nice nutritional software that we can analyze your diet from top to bottom. And we're going to take a look at the typical daily diet. And we're going to talk about some health risk factors associated with the American diet. And then we're going to finish up talking about some great ways to improve your nutritional palate and get good nutrition and minimize your likelihood of getting chronic disease due to nutrition. But as usual, I want to say, hey, thank you very much, Kangaroo Coffee, for being our sponsor in our virtual coffee chats. We appreciate it very much. So we're going to enjoy our quarter hour of wellness power, and let's go ahead and get after it. As usual, we have a disclaimer. If you haven't had your annual physical, blood work, if you're on the Phil-Long health insurance plan, you can get that done free of charge through our Care Here clinics up in Littleton or at our Sinton Road location. If you're not on our health care plan, it's preventive care. Make sure you get that done through your clinician so that if you do have something wrong, they can identify that issue at the earliest possible state and manage it before it becomes a chronic health condition. So with that, I'm going to do something a little different today. Got some fun stuff. And I sent out an email, kind of a little bit of teaser, but I'm going to talk about some things today and want to get you involved with it. So we've got a little question to ask you. And if you can get the correct answer and put it in the chat box at any time during today's presentation, whoever gets the correct answer, we're going to have a raffle drawing for a $30 grocery bag full of fresh, nutritious food. So if you know the answer to this question, go ahead and put it in the chat box. But what element of food raises your blood cholesterol values more than any other and should therefore be limited in the diet to no more than 10% of all calories? I've already got some choices coming up, so I'll be looking forward to getting your answer at the back. So take a look at that, and we'll address this here at the end of the program. Now, here's an example of the typical American diet. You can see on the graph on the left, we've got vegetables, fruits, grains, dairy, and so on. And what this graph represents is the gold represents intake below recommendations, and the blue indicates intake above recommended levels. So you can see that vegetables, about 90% of the population is not getting the recommended amount, while 10% is. Fruits, it's getting about 70 to 75% are lacking the appropriate fruit intake, and about 25% are getting the appropriate intake of that. You can see grains, you can see dairy, protein, but I want to take a look at the bottom three. You look at added sugars. Roughly 70% of the American population gets too much added sugar, it gets too much saturated fat, and then 90% of us get too much salt. So the typical American diet, although it does have nutritional value to it, there's some things in it that really aren't so good for our health. If you take a look at the right, 21% of the American population, they get their energy from what I call low density carbohydrates. They're getting it from refined grains, man-made carbs, fortified foods, simple sugars, and a number of things that we've talked about in prior coffee chats. In addition, even on a food label now, they have an added sugar element to the food label. And things like soda, these energy drinks, sports drinks, candies, and desserts, they add in another 14% of caloric intake. So even though typical American diet, we want you to get 40% of your nutrition from carbohydrates, you can see from these graphs, a lot of America, we are getting carbohydrates, but they're not the right kind of carbohydrates. And we get way too much salt, as you can see there on the right. So again, we got some data, and all this has come from research from 2015 to 2020. It's about 144,000 lives have been looked at. But the typical American diet lacks a number of things. We lack potassium, we lack fiber, we lack calcium, and we lack vitamin D. And I'd like to go through a couple of these real quick. But potassium, you hear about it all the time, bananas, but believe it or not, a potato skin has more potassium in it than a banana does. But spinach, sweet potatoes, oranges, avocados, you can see white beans. These are all great sources of potassium. So you want to add those to your diet if you can. Dietary fiber, there's two types. There's soluble fiber, which helps to manage our glucose and cholesterol levels. We talked about that last week during diabetes in our coffee chat. So that's really important to manage your blood glucose levels. And you can get soluble fiber from black, kidney, and lima beans. Those are also great protein sources, vegetable-based protein sources. Okay, you're not going to get me to eat a Brussels sprout, but I'll eat an avocado, some sweet potatoes, some broccoli. I'll even eat some turnips and figs, but no broccoli, no Brussels sprouts for this kid, not even wrapped in bacon. And that's saying something. Insoluble fiber helps with the digestion. It adds water to your stool. It helps to fight colorectal cancer. It helps for digestion and bowel health, and it's really good. Insulin sensitivity, again, mentioned that last week. But whole grains, again, not processed, 100% whole wheat is where you're going to get that. Cauliflower, green peas, dark leafy green vegetables like kale, spinach, we mentioned that before, and a number of others. Now, when you talk about calcium, we commonly talk calcium is what makes up most of our bone structure, but it's also very important for neural transmission. Our brains, our nerves that make our muscles move are also very involved with calcium, and we need that. And what's interesting is your body cannot absorb calcium unless it has vitamin D in store with it. So a lot of times they fortify milk, cheese products with vitamin D, which naturally has calcium in it, so that your body can absorb that. But to get calcium, you know, collard greens. I'm not eating collard greens either. I'll do some kale, maybe a sardine on a fancy pizza. But salmon, shrimp is a great source of calcium, as well as your essential amino acids. And then again, it's fortified in milk and cereals, like I mentioned. Now, vitamin D, it's good. It's for the absorption, like I said, of calcium. It helps to keep your bones and your teeth, all this healthy. So it's vitamin D is called the sunshine vitamin. As you get outside and get a tan, it actually, your body makes vitamin D. It's also called a hormone for that same reason. But you can find vitamin D in liver, eggs, mushrooms, and again, it's fortified commonly in cereals, juices, and dairy. Again, one thing I do want to mention, again, I'm not a big fan of breakfast cereal. They do fortify B vitamins and some of these others, but they're also very high on the glycemic index and the glycemic load chart, which we talked about last week, in helping to manage blood sugar and diabetes care. So, get something better than breakfast cereal for your breakfast, and instant oatmeal falls in the same category. But all in all, most of us we only survive with our diet. We really do not thrive. We are what we eat. And if we don't eat good nutrition, it comes back to get us. And I'd like to give you an example of the typical American diet right now. We've got a female. We're going to use her as our subject, 5'6", light activity, 150 pounds, a relatively moderately high BMI, but it's not risk factor high. That's 30. And she's 40 years age. And on this particular day, she had some coffee for breakfast, a breakfast croissant, brought in a homemade turkey sandwich on white bread, some cheddar cheese, some condiments, had a bag of chips, some side of cold slaw, washed it down with a 12-ounce cherry Coke. And then for dinner, which is usually the best homemade meal, had some meatloaf, mashed potatoes and gravy, some green beans, and then a slice of apple pie. Who can pass that up? And some ice cream. Hey, and it's close to Halloween, so I mean, who can pass up a Reese's peanut butter cup? I knocked two of those out, or this gal knocked two of those out for today's lunch, and some goodies, and this is kind of what we get. Now, you're looking at an awful lot here. This is comes right out of the nutritional software that I have, and I'd like to extend the invitation. If you would like to see your diet analysis, we can do this, and it's a very, very detailed assessment. But a couple of things I'd like to point out. There wasn't a whole lot of food there, but the calories that they ate, this particular subject overate her total calorie intake by about 15%. And you can see that on the second row on the left-hand column. Calories from fat are 39% or significantly higher than what they should take. So meatloaf really is probably not a good protein choice. Calories from saturated fat are at 193%. And I want to mention real quick about saturated fat, because saturated fat in your diet is what really elevates blood glucose levels. It's not really cholesterol in and of itself, but it's saturated fat. So saturated fat is found primarily in animal products, so you want to try to look out for that. But again, saturated fat, try to keep that down to 10% of your total calorie intake, and you should be in good shape with that. Now, carbohydrates, they overeat in the carbohydrates, but here's what I really want to point out, and hopefully you can see my cursor, but over here you've got vitamins and you've got your minerals, and this little black line right here means that you need to get this on a daily amount to make sure that you're thriving with your nutrition and not just surviving. When you see red or yellow on this assessment, it means that you need more of this particular nutritional element. And as you can see, even though they ate a lot of calories, this nutritional profile is extremely poor. I do not recommend multivitamins, and I don't have the time to share about that, but we'll talk about that some other time. But if you're worried about getting calcium, take an individual calcium tablet. If you're worried about getting vitamin D, take an individual vitamin D capsule. Not a big fan of multivitamins. The best way to improve your nutritional profile, we've heard it from the day we were born, is to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. That's the way to go. Now, on this particular slide, I'm a big fan of what I call 40-30-30. That's a ratio of carbs to proteins and fats. In this particular subject, 11% of her diet came from protein, 41% came from carbohydrates, and then 47% came from fat. So this subject has an awful lot of fat in their diet. And I want to go down to the second little picture there on the left. Their saturated fat intake is at 16%. So they're eating a lot of fat, they're eating a lot of saturated fat, and this is what leads to heart disease. You want to have that saturated fat value under 10% of your total caloric intake. And then real quickly, we've talked about essential amino acids in the past, but getting a slice of ham on your croissant and meatloaf for dinner and not a quality protein product really leaves your protein assessment extremely low. And you can see here that this person's only getting about 4% of their daily recommended essential amino acid intake, and that's not good because, as you know, protein is the building block of pretty much all of our body parts, and we need that on a daily basis. So what are the risk factors of the typical American diet? Well, here they are. Heart disease, #1 cause of death in America. Stroke, #5 cause of death in America. And what brings these on? High saturated fats, which again is associated with red meat, some dairy products, low soluble fiber, lots of sugar, especially man-made carbohydrates, high salt, excessive alcohol, and processed and refined foods. That is what causes heart disease and strokes. Cancer is high fat, especially saturated fat, low insoluble fiber, heavy salt, again, excessive alcohol, which is really, it goes in like a carbohydrate, but it's processed like a fat. Processed meats and foods, and folks, bacon is a processed meat, so watch out for your bacon. Maybe wrap it around your Brussels sprout, and that'll offset the two. Diabetes, #7 cause of death. We talked about that last week. Again, sugary drinks, starchy foods, and man-made carbs. Now, I do want to mention, although hypertension and obesity are not in the top 10 causes of death, these foods I just mentioned are also highly associated with high blood pressure and a high or a poor body mass index. As a result, or if you have these are also risk factors for heart disease, stroke, cancer, and diabetes. So look out for that. Our diet really influences our health a lot. We are what we eat. And if you want to really get after it, let's close up and talk about some guidelines for good health. And probably the first one is follow a healthy eating pattern across your lifespan. If you can get your kids to eat healthy and well and not just give them, comfort food, donuts, goodies, and things like that, it'll be much easier for them to have a quality nutritional palate when they get older. Focus on a variety of nutrient-dense foods and the amounts. Again, overeating is not good. But try to choose foods that have bright colors, that are fresh, that are raw. We talked about plant-based diets in the past. Go back to the Healthy Habits um, Facebook page, and you can look at some videos on nutrition to kind of shore up your knowledge on that. But again, look out for extra calories, added sugars, the high saturated fats, and the salt. That's very common in foods. It increases the shelf life of them. But in reality, it's really not the best thing for us to be eating, especially in big volumes. Try to go to healthier food choices as far as your drinks go. Water is a great food choice. Try to get that in your diet. If you drink coffee or have an alcoholic drink, try to drink water in between, because those others they're diuretics, which means that it causes you to lose water. Try to support that healthy eating platform for everyone. Like I said, get your kids to eat well, and when they become adults, it's a lot easier to manage that. And a couple more things: eat a wide variety of vegetables. Like I mentioned, again, raw foods, fresh foods are good. Get your protein smoothie in the morning. Get your fruit smoothie in the morning, maybe a vegetable smoothie in the evening. Try to get vegetable-based protein. So again, you can mix a bean and a grain. So like a kidney bean and a rice, like a wild rice would be a good option. And then again, try to minimize those man-made carbs, fortified foods. Eat brightly colored foods, and I think you can dramatically increase your nutritional profile. Because like I said, you are what you eat, and if we don't eat good quality nutrition, when we do need to pull on it for antioxidant support, to minimize free radical damage, it's just not there. And so our quality of life suffers. And like I said, we survive, we just don't thrive. So again, next week we got the last in our series of chronic disease and behavioral health. We got a special guest, Mike Mazzola, from the Energy Resource Center. He's going to talk about home health wellness, and got a lot of good information on that. And we're going to let him just take over, run this ship next week. And like I said, if you have an idea that you'd like for us to cover in a coffee chat, let's check it out. And I know I was watching, we got 17 chatters and suggestions on the chat. So let's see what we got. All right, I'm going to go up a little bit. Oh, I've got a lot of them. Yeah, you can give the answer. Go ahead and give it out. But the correct answer: Kimberly, Pat, Polly, Diane, Amanda, Cindy. Most of you got it right. Oh, one of them said sugar, and that's not right. But the correct answer, folks, is saturated fat. And saturated fat you find primarily in animal products. And believe it or not, saturated fat increases your blood cholesterol values more than cholesterol itself. A couple of y'all put trans fat, and I'm going to say that that's a correct answer too. That's a man-made fat. They actually hydrogenate a healthy fat to make it unhealthy and saturated. And you might say, what's a trans fat? Well, margarine is a trans fat. Butter is a saturated fat. And our government is actually getting rid of trans fats in our diet. So good, great. Saturated fat. Looks like most of y'all got that. Again, 19. We had 20 people check in on the chat line. So hopefully you enjoyed that. That was pretty cool. And thank you very much for your time today. And we'll see you next week at the same Coffee Chat channel and the same Coffee Chat time. Good day, everybody.